Alex Ricardo serves as Beasley's Technology, Media, and Business Group with managing business development initiatives for the Beasley Breach Response Program. Alex is based in New York City and provides support and guidance to Beasley insured based from both a breach preparedness and breach response perspective. He brings to Beasley a 16-year background of service to Fortune 500 corporations and government agencies addressing information leakage prevention, data and e-discovery, message encryption, and internal threat management. Prior to joining Beasley, Alex worked with Kroll Incorporated, a leading global security and risk management company. During his tenure at Kroll, Alex personally oversaw 250+ data breaches ranging from 1 to in excess of 30 million individuals, spanning a multitude of breach scenarios. Alex?
So good morning, everyone. Appreciate you making some time today. Although I work for an insurance carrier, surprise, surprise, we're not going to talk about insurance. So what I'm going to focus on today, as the title says, is understanding the risk. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about what are data breaches and how they're caused. I'll give you one of my pet peeves. I don't like calling this insurance cyber liability. Because once you hear the word cyber, everybody equates it to electronic, cyber attacks, foreign states of government coming in and trying to get into your network. Those things do happen, but that's certainly not the crux of it. And so what we're going to try and do in the next half hour is give you at least a level set of really where this risk sits in any organization, even beyond the cyber attacks, even beyond the data center. And so having that appreciation hopefully will give you the ability to have a more informed decision on whether or not this coverage might meet your needs at your organization. So start off, I'm employed in the insurance world, so I got to disclaim I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you legal advice today. So all this information is for information purposes only, but it's really good information for you to bring back to your respective teams, giving them an appreciation of really where this risk might sit within your organization. So we're going to talk about this so-called spectrum of risk. And the spectrum is pretty broad. Again, as I said, one slice of that spectrum is, of course, cyber attacks. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's far broader than that. And so the first thing I'll talk about is the unintended disclosure of physical records. We always lose sight of that. About 16% of the incidents we see at Beasley in particular, 1 in 6, 1 in 7 are physical records. Nothing to do with your electronic data, nothing to do with the data center. It's a formidable metric. So we have to put the same kinds of safeguards and initiatives in place, believe it or not, for your file rooms, your file cabinets, and so on, because there is obviously exposure there that can raise a liability to your company from having a data breach. We first talk about unshredded documents. So when I do go to clients, clearly virtually all of them are going to say, yeah, we have shredders or shredder bins. I always follow up by asking them, do you have enough of them? Where are they? We often hear that the organization has one on the workforce floor. It's on the corner of the floor. And then, of course, the employees over here, they just finished their 2 p.m. pasta lunch. They're in the food coma. Nobody wants to get up to go over there. So they throw it in the round file next to their desk. And we worry about the documents winding up in the dumpster behind their building tonight. We worry about it because certain individuals like to dumpster dive. Believe it or not, the criminals are not those individuals. Criminals often consider it a little bit of passe or they're prima donnas. They don't like to go dumpster dive. There's 2 other stakeholders that do. So we actually worry about investigative journalists. We've seen cases where investigative journalists will dumpster dive. They have obviously a vested interest to do an expose story. So we have seen cases where they have exposed companies of having a breach. Believe it or not, the other stakeholder, regulators. Attorneys general, not themselves, but their staff, love to dumpster dive. So we have seen cases where some AGs are more aggressive than others, particularly California, Texas, Massachusetts probably lead the pack. But there's other AGs that are starting to entertain that approach. Why? Well, AGs like to grow up to be senators and governors. They have political drive. So there's been examples of that even in the past. At one point, Attorney General Blumenthal of Connecticut, who is now Senator Blumenthal, his entire campaign was run on breaches he identified from his staff finding breaches occurring at companies. It's a great political platform to show you're fighting for your constituents. So we've seen where, again, this kind of situation arises because someone has a vested interest to identify a breach is occurring. I talk about file cabinets. So if you're going through any kind of M&A activity, facility shutdown, office consolidation, we certainly hope someone is going to wear the privacy hat and make sure that every file cabinet, every desk drawer, every closet has been checked before the last person leaves and shuts off the lights. We have seen where file cabinets are donated to a charity. The charity opens the file cabinet drawers, and what do they find? Patient files, employee records, customer records. Nobody bothered to check the contents before they got rid of the asset. So in those kinds of initiatives are going on in your organization, please keep that in mind. Acts of God do not absolve you from breach response. So natural disasters play into this as well. We hear of earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes. Paper files are in the cornfields, across the highway, what have you. That doesn't remove the obligation under the law that you have to respond to it and deal with it under the privacy notification laws that are out there. So natural disasters, as much as we'd like to try and prevent those, we're really at the mercy that, if that occurs, we have to still deal with it. I always bring up X-rays as an anecdote, but it can apply to really any kind of social engineering tactic. So social engineering, and not to be confused with social media, is the act of impersonation. So some people think of someone getting a UPS uniform and a criminal comes in to pretend to be the UPS guy or gal, and they're going to take boxes of data out. Well, we've actually seen examples where criminals impersonate the X-ray disposal company at hospitals. They'll go in and they'll steal by the barrelful all the old black and white X-rays. They don't care about the medical data. You can actually melt old X-rays and extract silver. There's a high silver content. So you can actually see where criminals will come in, perhaps creating a breach, and maybe not even needing the data or finding value in the data, but it still puts a liability on the organization. We've seen examples where facilities are getting expanded. There's construction activity. So criminals will get construction hats, put on a bunch of blue jeans, carry some fake blueprints, and walking around and stealing laptops or getting other data throughout the facility. Those are the kinds of things we need to be mindful of as well, because social engineering does play an active role in a lot of these kinds of situations as well. So we also have to think about the unintended disclosure of electronic assets. So I'm sure everyone here has probably sat at some point in time figuring out, oh, my laptop is really slow. What excuse can I give IT if I call them to get a new laptop? And so we always wonder, what do they do with the old ones? We have to make sure they're properly disposed, either a proper wipe down or the most ideal model, physically destroying hard drives. But nonetheless, we have to make sure those practices are in place. I don't have to tell you to look any further than eBay. If you go on eBay today and you look at who's buying old laptops, the majority of people buying old laptops are coming from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. And it's clearly not because there's a lack of devices over there. It's clearly because they know most consumers are not good at wiping down the hard drives. They want the data off of them. So we have to be mindful of the right practice of how you dispose of those drives. You'll also notice in my list, I include office equipment such as faxes, copiers, printers, scanners. These effectively are computers. There's hard drives on them. So when you're ready and it's time to dispose of them, we have to be mindful how you do that as well. You'll notice the last bullet, if you lease any of your office equipment, I would strongly encourage you to go back and review your leasing contracts. You want to make sure there's provisions at the end of the leasing company is either going to give you a certification of wiping of the drive or giving you the option to purchase the hard drive back so you can physically destroy it yourself. I don't have to tell you to look any further than if you look in the media or Google. There's been enough examples where companies have had breaches because of this situation, where the leasing company releases the office equipment piece to another company, and they neglected to wipe down the drive appropriately. There was an example in the Chicago area a few years ago of a significant healthcare organization. That exactly happened to them. They leased their copier, the lease was up, the leasing company took the copier back, and as Murphy's Law would have it, they released it to this little unknown company called CBS News in Chicago, And the CBS News investigative journalist, by instinct, saw a new copier and said, let me get a forensics firm in here. I want to see what's on the hard drive of this new copier. And they found 800,000 images of PHI still on the hard drive of the copier. So we have to be mindful that you have those rights provisions if those pieces of equipment are going to be leased, to make sure that that doesn't, of course, happen to you. So we move on to the lovely term of phishing. So phishing is on the decline, which is wonderful news. Spear phishing, huge rise, significantly right now. So just as give a quick history lesson. So phishing's been around probably since the mid-90s. Early so-called victims were organizations with large customer bases. So often the early victims were Bank of America, US Bank, eBay. You often saw emails that looked like it came from eBay in the hopes, what the criminals were hoping is that the randomized emails would coincidentally hit an eBay customer or a B of A customer. And you'd fall for the scam to say, oh yeah, let me log in or provide my credit card details. And criminals wound up with that information. This wasn't the best success. Criminals said the hit rate was okay, but it wasn't wonderful. So as the term applies, they got more targeted, and this term spear phishing is a more targeted or precise approach. They're able to get a better success rate. And the way they can succeed at doing that is actually being able to hack into organizations and steal not social security numbers, not credit card numbers, but just simple databases or spreadsheets of email addresses. They now know likelihood of all those emails being legitimate is good, but more importantly, they know exactly the scam email to make it look like the company they just hacked into. And so lo and behold, their success rates have gone up. And keep in mind, criminals are not going after the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples of the world. Those network security postures are pretty good. So they're going down to the low-hanging fruit. They're going to middle market, mid-size, small-size organizations, companies that often tell me every day, we're too small. These hackers aren't going to go after me. They're going after the Apples of the world. I'm like, nah, that's actually just the opposite. They're looking for organizations that they can get into rather quickly and be able to get that information out. Spear phishing also takes on other flavors. And social engineering, once again, plays into this. Two very common trends, if you will, we're seeing right now at Beasley in the last 6 to 8 months. One of them is what we happen to just coin the phrase and call the CFO email. It's around fraudulent wire transfers. So not even anything to do with identity theft or a data breach in that respect, but sending fake emails spoofed looking like the CFO, perhaps going to someone in accounts payable saying, oh, I need you to wire these $50,000 right away. Can you please send that over? We're seeing a lot of this. And so lo and behold, you're seeing those kinds of scams play in. That's not just to deal with identity theft, but in this case, actual crime and financial losses. We're also seeing a scam that we call the HR payroll form email, where we see emails spoofed that look like came from the HR director. And it's going to every employee. And there's an attached file called payroll form. And the email often reads, last minute change is a payroll form. You have to complete it by end of day. You're not going to get paid at the next pay period. Well, if that's going to every employee, tell me at least one employee is not going to click on that file pretty quick. So lo and behold, there's a zero-day vulnerability virus or some malware on that attachment, and lo and behold, hackers have some means to get in. We've seen a lot of these as well. One of the things we've been educating some employers to do is build a policy and educate workforce that when HR directors or somebody that often communicates to everyone in general, you get in the practice of sending a so-called heads-up email the day before, saying tomorrow you will get an email from John Smith, HR director, having an attachment called such and such. And educate workforce that if you don't ever get a heads-up email and an email is going to everyone, don't click on it. I often get asked and told by clients, well, what happens if the scammer sends that heads-up email? That's okay. You have a 24-hour window. Someone's going to catch on that that was not legitimate and then be able to alert everybody as well. So that actually has been an effective means to at least stop this particular type of situation. Another way to stop this, and if you can do, not to get too technical, you can prevent certain email aliases like everyone being used from an outside party and only be used internally or select certain roles or email addresses that can do that. A variety of ways can hopefully try and at least minimize some of this kind of impact. So now we get on to what everybody likes to talk about. So we get on to cyber attacks. We get on to malware, viruses, network intrusions. At Beasley in particular, we've seen about a third of the events that we see fall into this category. So this also does include ransomware. Ransomware is something we have now seen significantly. We've seen a 400% increase this year alone, and we're not even halfway through the year. So no doubt ransomware is also into this bucket. But one thing that's also important to know, and of course some of my colleagues that are going to speak after me, we're going to go a lot further into cyber attacks and the like. But one of the things I wanted to leave you with are what are some of the commonalities or common threads we see when a cyber attack occurs. I think it's important. I'm not painting a rosy picture, so I apologize. But I wanted to at least share with you some of those common threads because the likelihood of you facing some of these commonalities is there. And so you need to appreciate and understand what you might have to deal with in the event of a cyber attack. The first one is very obvious. You probably didn't need me to tell you this. More often than not, these attacks are being stemmed or sourced by an external party, someone on the outside. Once in a while, do you get the IT professional who's disgruntled, who's on their way out, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes involuntarily, creating a cyber attack? Absolutely. But the vast majority is someone on the outside. The vulnerability is likely sourced through a third-party vendor. Yeah, more often than not, the attackers are not necessarily coming to you directly, but they're going to one of your vendors and maybe through getting into their network or hacking their network, and through the connectivity you've established with that vendor, they've gotten into your network. So there's a lot of breaches out there in the news where this is a very common example. So it's often the hacker's not necessarily coming to you as the target, but they're going to be going to a vendor and then going in indirectly that way. So that's something just to keep in mind. So you're really at the mercy of your contracts, if you think about it, with your vendors, that they're going to have the same network security posture as you do. Is that really an exposure point you're comfortable to accept or something that you have to consider as part of your risk management initiative? The event will not be detected for months or years. So I'm often, when I sit down with CISOs, they'll say to me, Alex, we have the best intrusion detection systems on our network. If we had a cyber attack, we're going to know about it within moments, within a couple of hours, a couple of days. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I usually pull out a few forensic studies that are out there. There's some good ones out there from some forensics firms, and pretty much what we see across the board, from the time a hacker gets into your network to the time they're discovered, on average, you're looking at about 6 to 8 months. So imagine a hacker getting into your network today, and you're not going to know about it until Valentine's Day of next year. Imagine how much data they would be able to see, potentially exfiltrate, compromise, tamper with. That's a big exposure. Last year at Beasley, we had one insured, which was a Fortune 1000 company. So you could imagine the network security posture of that organization. They had a cyber attack that, through forensics, we were able to prove that the hacker was actually in for over 2 years, and nobody knew about it. So it's unfortunate that when they are finally discovered, they've probably been doing some bad stuff for some time. The breach entity will learn of the event from a third party. So if you had a cyber attack tomorrow, odds are your own folks are not going to identify it. They're likely going to be notified by someone on the outside. And that party on the outside, more often than not, is going to be law enforcement. So imagine getting that little knock on the door and it's coming from the FBI or the Secret Service, and they're going to say, here's some evidence of data that you own, correct? Is this yours? Absolutely. Okay, I can't tell you what we know, I can't tell you how we know, but I'm telling you your data is being compromised as part of an ongoing investigation we're doing. And you're going to say, thank you so much, Mr. FBI agent or Mr. US Secret Service agent. What else can you share with us? I can't share anything else with you because that's going to affect my investigation. Be fortunate I told you this. So now you're in that predicament where you're not going to get further information. You've been shown proof you're having a breach or an attack, and you're more or less left to your own devices. That happens quite a bit, so we have to be mindful of that. The last bullet, in my opinion, is what keeps me up at night the most. And it takes a lot to keep me up at night about breaches. This is a reputational concern. So when I've seen companies having cyber attacks, they've now dealt with the response, now all the lawsuits come in, the litigation issues arise. I often get a client saying, Alex, please tell me the forensics firm can attest in court this was the most sophisticated hack they've ever seen. It took 1,000 people in a bunker in Russia to do it, because I got to save face when it comes to the public scrutiny that I'm going to get. I've been handling breaches for 12 years. I can count on one hand where that statement would be true. So the vast majority of the time, these exploits are easily preventable, easily avoidable. My nephew could have done them, that kind of situation. So from a reputational side, the odds of you looking good is not going to be there. So yeah, I apologize, not painting a rosy picture, but it's important to appreciate these are possible likelihoods that you're going to have to deal with if a cyber attack were to occur. So we talk about lost, missing, or stolen assets. And here in particular, I'm talking about portable devices. So portable devices, laptops, thumb drives, smartphones, tablets, backup tapes, archive tapes, backup drives. Think of anything portable in that sense. Number one issue with regulators is when these devices cause a breach and they were unencrypted. So whether I'm talking to any of the attorneys general, whether I'm talking to Office of Civil Rights under HIPAA High-Tech, this is fingernails on the blackboard to these regulators. Right or wrong, and believe me, I can sit here and debate and argue where in some cases some devices cannot be encrypted, but right or wrong, they find this is inexcusable in 2016. So we have to recognize that you can have a lot of regulatory scrutiny by not encrypting portable devices. If you're not encrypting these devices, you need to make that a priority right now. Virtually every state notification law, the only exception being two, Massachusetts and as of July 1st, Tennessee, those are the only two states that don't give you a so-called safe harbor provision for encrypted devices causing a breach. So all these states but two say, oh, if you had a breach involving an encrypted device, you got an out, meaning you don't have to deal with notice and response and so on. Massachusetts, Tennessee, they've declared their AG wants to ask a few questions, not just automatically grant you a safe harbor. They want to do a little investigating. But odds are they'll likely give it to you unless there's some really extraordinary circumstances. So what a better way to prevent having to deal with this whole nightmare of response than to make sure these devices are encrypted. Now, some carriers, I'm not going to go criticize my peers, but some of our peers actually will exclude coverage if the device is unencrypted. So be mindful of that if you carry cyber today. You want to certainly make sure that you don't have those kinds of exclusions in there. So no doubt this is something, in my opinion, should be like one of the top priorities you're going to be working on. So there's this official classification we call mishaps due to broken business practices. I have a more technical term. I call them oops moments. I call them accidents. Nothing malicious, nothing intentional, human error. Accidents occur. We're all human. So therefore, errors are going to occur. About a fourth of the events fall in this category. So you can have the best controls in place, the best IT talent, the best network security posture in place. At the end of the day, we're human. So oops moments are going to occur. You're going to send a fax to the wrong number or an email to the wrong email address or forget a certain configuration on a server or a firewall. It's going to happen. And so about a fourth of the events are going to fall in this category. And then the last one, we all have halos above our heads, at least I believe so. But not everybody does. About 10%, 1 in 10 of the events we see are as a result of a rogue employee. And so lo and behold, again, we want to believe all of our employees are honorable, trustworthy, loyal, they have the right allegiance. There's always the chance of a bad apple in the bunch. And more often than not, we see two different considerations. One is the disgruntled employee. Sorry if there's IT professionals in the room, but more often than not, that winds up being the IT professional. As I said earlier, sometimes they're on their way out voluntarily, sometimes involuntarily, and lo and behold, they may create the havoc or create the risk of data being compromised. The other consideration is the employees that are enticed. They start off with the halo, but unfortunately the halo goes away. What happens is criminals will find out, HR employees, call center employees, and they will approach them to say, hey, I know you have access to a lot of data. I'll give you X number of dollars for every name and social you give me, for example. This we've seen quite a bit. In the southeast part of the US, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, as a simple example, there's a huge crime ring, probably still ongoing, where HR employees of hospitals are actually selling off data, information of physicians, surgeons, nurses, to criminals who are filing false tax returns to get refund checks. So it's very simple, because God bless the HR employees and the call center reps, they're not paid like the CEO. So when someone says, I'll give you $100 for every name and social, yeah, I give you 10 of those, I get $1,000, that's pretty good. So unfortunately, some employees succumb to the enticement, and of course, again, you're dealing with that situation. So that's what I had for you. Is I wanted, as I said, set a level set for today's discussion is don't just think of this as a cyber concern. Don't think of it as just a cyber attack. Yes, that is something that gets the interests of the media and gets the interests of people to talk about because it's quote unquote sexy to talk about it. But as you saw, a lot of these incidents and part of that spectrum, or a good part of that spectrum, is what I call boring events. They're not really that exciting, but there's still that same kind of liability exposure you face, whether it's a cyber attack or not. Okay. Any questions I could answer for you before we transition over to the next presenter? Yes. Sure. So the question was about encryption on phones, for example. When it comes to iOS in particular, so we're thinking iPhones or iPads, don't misunderstand that the 4-digit PIN everybody punches to get onto your phone, don't assume that that's encryption. So that is in fact just authentication. The data that's sitting on the phone, if I place the phone here on the desk and I walk away, the technical term is data's at rest. That data is not technically encrypted. It's just sitting there unencrypted, but I need a password to get to the data. What companies need to do is actually encrypt the data while it's just sitting there at rest on the table. There are encryption platforms and technologies companies are considering, especially if you're going into the BYOD space. If you bring your own device, you're going to want to do encryption measures on the data that is owned by the company. The term that we often hear out there is what's called compartmentalizing the phone. So you can compartmentalize the data that's work-related, encrypt that, leave the family photos, leave the personal address book alone, but at least make sure that data is encrypted so heaven forbid the phone's lost. For the company's interest, that data won't potentially be compromised. There are a variety of technologies out there for iOS, for Android. I mean, I'm happy to talk offline if you need to on some recommendations. But if you are doing BYOD or entertaining that, you certainly want to make sure you're including those kinds of technologies. No? Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex. Our next speaker is John Harmon from FrSecure, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. So John?
How's everybody doing? Is everybody tired? What's going on? All right, well, I am John Harmon, and I work with FrSecure. We're a local, the short term, and my president would hammer me if you heard me say this, but we're a cybersecurity consulting company. So we're the guys out there helping you understand when you have security risk from a policy standpoint, physical standpoint, technical standpoint. We do a lot of those kinds of things. I lead our security and project management teams. So I see a lot of these things, and I think we're going to talk mostly today about social engineering and phishing and all that kind of stuff. How many IT professionals in the room? All right, I won't pick on you guys too bad. Anybody want to venture a definition of social engineering? It's a trick question. Kind of. Attacking people. For all the press that's out there, and Alex did a great job of telling us about all the different ways that data is breached and everything else, people are the newest and most effective attack vector, taking advantage of people. Right? That's what we're talking about here. And we'll go through some examples. I'll even tell some cool hacker stories. It's going to be fun. So very briefly about FrSecure, we've been around since about 2008. Work mostly with small and middle-sized organizations. What we really have is about a dozen security experts on staff, 10, 15, 20 years experience, a lot of IT and compliance and risk management backgrounds. We believe that the security industry is broken, and we're trying to fix it. We're trying to do the right thing and help people through this conversation and understand where they have risk. We're also, we don't advertise it readily, but we are a breach response firm, and it is just FYI, very expensive to have us drop everything and parachute in and help you deal with your data breach. It's a lot cheaper to do it on your own terms and be proactive and all that fun stuff. So just FYI on that. So the textbook definition of social engineering, the psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. It's tricking people. It's con man stuff. Right? It's not technical at all. A couple simpler definitions. Okay, famous social engineers. Anybody ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can? If you haven't, you should go see it. Anybody ever know who Frank Abagnale is or heard him speak? Right? Amazing guy. I mean, you can understand how he just exudes confidence and can get people to give him what he wants, whether it's information or free plane tickets or whatever, checks that he needs. But that was all before the internet, all before this data stuff, and he was just conning people out of information. It was a lot about check fraud and that kind of thing, right? Very famous social engineer. Now, why would I put Mark Zuckerberg up there as a famous social engineer? I'll pick on you if you don't talk. That's right. This guy has you absolutely convinced to share every detail of your personal lives on the public internet. And it is very public, no matter what your privacy settings tell you. Everybody knows it. Anybody in here not have a Facebook account? All right, I'm still going to get you guys. So common types of social engineering, certainly phishing, we learned about is on the decline, but a very particular type of phishing called spear phishing is on the uptick. Telephone calls, that's still a thing. People calling, sometimes not for direct reasons like you would think, right? It's not telephone calls, and this is about all the time I'm going to spend on this, is not like, hey, this is John, give me your password. It's like, hey, I'm looking for your IT director, but somebody might have left. Can you tell me who that is, or who your CFO is, and what's your email address? I need to send you some information. So they're trying to get like who's in the organization, maybe what kind of IT equipment you use, who's important around there, how does your email formatted? It's precursory type information that they're building to something. And then in person, and those are the cool impersonation and kind of cool stories I'm going to tell you about a little later. That still happens. It's still it takes a lot of gumption to do that, but we have a couple of really talented physical social engineers that do that kind of thing on staff with us, and they have a lot of fun doing it. So most of the time, the purpose of this type of attack is to get a foothold or a small piece of information that could lead to a lot more. It's not necessarily bringing you to your knees day one. We learned that attacks last for months, sometimes years, and they're just looking for that way in. So the folks that we have on our staff as security people, they are technical and they are gifted, and if they were going to make you a target personally or in your business, there is nothing you could do about it. You would never know they were there until they were gone. They're that talented, okay? There's only about 5% of all attacks that you've heard of that are that sophisticated. I think you said you can count on one hand how many times in the last 12 years of data breaches it's been so complex and so sophisticated that there was nothing you could do about it, right? That's the kind of people we have. And they will tell you, why would I spend 20 hours and $20,000 trying to brute force a firewall when I can just pick up the phone or send somebody an email and talk them out of a password? The reason why this is on the rise is because it works and because it's easy. Make sense? All right. So the most common types of phishing, we'll go through some examples here. I don't want to linger too much, but you know, we talked about the number of phishing campaigns, and this is like the Nigerian prince who needs your help getting money out of the country. Those are phishing emails, and those are on the decline. The ones that are on the incline are the very specific ones. Somebody knows something about you, or you know, your company, where you work, where you go to church, where your kids play baseball, whatever it is. It's getting a little bit more sophisticated because they're getting better information and more of it. So here's an example of a phishing email that we sent out. The names and everything have been changed to protect the innocent, of course. But this is an attack that we did on a bank's business clients. And you know, we said, hey, there's this transaction, we're not sure if it's real. Can you log in and authenticate and tell us whether or not this was actually you that made this charge? Anybody want to venture a guess at how many we got out of 100? It was about 50. It was about half. We got username and password into business like general ledger accounts. Here's another one that we did. Google is incredibly easy to copy and spoof. You know, it's really easy to just kind of copy and paste and stand up as your own website. The URL there, what should you see there in the URL if you were about to log into Google AdWords or Google Drive or something like that? Yeah, at least google.com, right? But it's close enough, right? You might also see what, HTTPS? You might see that little green bar, you know, go out. Here's US Bank. We didn't even try on this one. We just put the IP address in the URL. Still got half of everybody we sent this to. A couple new types of attacks. The browsers have kind of rallied to deal with this one, and it's gotten a little bit better. We're still seeing it, and it's mostly a settings issue. If you're allowing things to auto-run on computers, this is a malvertising, which is through very legitimate channels for web advertising, like CNN and everything. There's like audio files and video files that automatically run on the computer, and they may be laced with something that will, you know, infect your browser, or, you know, collect information from your browser, or even, you know, do an executable. It's getting more and more rare, but ultimately just use ad block. You know, it's those kinds of things. And then spear phishing, obviously very targeted phishing attacks. This is one of my favorites here. Robin Sage, Facebook friend. I'm sure some of you are friends with her. Robin Sage does not exist. Robin claimed to be an employee of Naval Warfare Command. She has hundreds of contacts, LinkedIn contacts, job offers, invitations to come speak at things like this, all kinds of stuff. She doesn't exist, but she is used to gather information on people that would connect with her. Right? You know, all that stuff that you can't see on people's Facebook profile, then you're their friend, and then you can see all their photos and everything else. That's what they were using Robin for. And she had people overseas, soldiers overseas, geotagging themselves saying, hey, Robin, we're here, you know, and hey, how's it going, and liking posts. Now, why would that be a problem? Soldiers overseas at particular locations at particular times? Yeah, that's not good, right? Be careful who you friend if you don't, you know people. But this is a pretty common tactic. Our social engineers routinely have 4 or 5 fake Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, LinkedIn accounts, all kinds of things, trying to prey on your need to or want to connect with people who may be able to help you, or that you may have a mutual connection with, or something like that. We get asked about this one a lot, so I'm just going to talk about it. Fazio Mechanical. Anybody heard about Fazio Mechanical before the Target breach? No? Nobody? Really? Small HVAC company based in Pennsylvania, I think. And this is how the Target breach started, right? We talked about vendors being a primary attack vector. And my guess is that nobody went after Fazio Mechanical in the grand plan of finding their way to Target. My guess is somebody at Fazio got phished, somebody got their access, somebody got or found a gateway to Target and said, whoa, this might be big, went and sold the access to somebody who really had an interest in getting into Target system, and that's where it got technical, all the pivoting around and getting into the card data and blah, 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 blah. That all started with somebody who clicked on an email they shouldn't have. Right? All right, so we're going to tell some cool hacker stories at the end if we get, if we have time, and if you have personal experience with this kind of thing, I'd love to hear it too. The stories are pretty funny. And okay, so a quick time real social engineer, or quick real-time social engineering quiz. If I shared a website with you, like for instance, download my app. It's going to tell you where 4-star and up restaurants are within a 20-mile radius of your house. And for using my app, I'm going to get you a free meal the next time you go in there. Would you give it a shot? Right? Y'all would. It's like people like, I don't like free things, right? If you did sign up for it, would you use a distinct username and password? Or would you use the same username and password you use for everything else? It's about half and half in the room. I'm getting, some people are like, would you tell me the truth in your security questions? Everybody who doesn't have a Facebook account, I just got you. I got into my buddy's bank account because I know him well. Because I know where he was born, and I know what his mother's maiden name is. I know what school he went to. I know his dog's name. I know his first car. I know all of that stuff. I've known him for 20 years. And I went, well, here's your email address. I'm going to hit forgot my password and answer your security questions and get into your bank account. I mean, his eyes were this big, right? By the way, where is all that information? All that security question information? Facebook. If you have an uncle, I know your mother's maiden name, right? It's all there. So I'm not going to leave you hanging on this one. I know everybody's like, oh, crap. But do we need to take a break real quick? Maybe we go change all this stuff? So what I do is when I answer a security question, so I don't have to remember, there's only so much RAM up here. I can't remember things that aren't true necessarily. So I just code my answers. And I'm not going to tell you exactly how I do it because then you'll hack me. But I take the first and last letter of my answer and move it up or down one in the alphabet. Right? So I'm very originally from Dallas, Texas. So if I spelled Dallas on a security question answer, I would spell it like E-A-L-L-A-T. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so we'll take a quick break. Everybody go change all your passwords. Okay. So how can you reduce your risks? Train people. Can we all agree that people are your biggest security risk? Can I get a wholesale agreement on that? Can we also all agree that you can't fix people with technology? The best firewall in the world is no match for somebody who has an authorized password for it, right? So you got to train people. This is a people issue. You have to address it at a people level. You have to help them understand the concepts that we've talked about today. You have to make them aware of what's out there. Not scare them, make them aware, right? We've heard of contests, right? We do phishing for hire all the time, and our success rate is obscene with industries that you would hope they wouldn't be obscene, our success rates in phishing. And the only way we've ever seen the percentage of emails that were clicked on go down is from companies who have really good, consistent, and fun training and awareness programs. Here's a tip. Anybody put up like notices in the office, right, when there's something going on, like a party, or here's a notice here, this is changing, remember our payroll system, whatever, you know, whatever it is. If you're going to do this for training and awareness on security, and you put it on that board in the break room, you know, next to the workers' comp and the minimum wage poster and all that, I'm not even going to see it. I just look right by it. It's just like, just blends in the background for me. If you put it in the bathroom, I'll have it memorized by Tuesday. Little trick, just telling you, put it above urinals, put it in the stalls. Everybody will like, oh yeah, remember that, all those statistics on phishing and all that kind of stuff? The other thing is having clear policies and procedures for handling these types of things. We did a phishing attack for an organization, and they did a sample size of their entire company. So they had about 1,000 employees, and they phished about 250 of them. We had a gentleman who recognized right away, because of his training, that this is a phishing attack, forwarded the email to the entire organization saying, nobody click on this, it's a phishing attack, and perpetuated our attack, and we actually got more responses than we sent emails. Nobody told him, don't forward that. Nobody told him what to do with it or who to notify or how to notify those people. He had no idea. There was no policy. There was no training around that. He had no clue. You gotta be really clear about that stuff. Do you want him to delete it? Do you want him to delete it, go into delete folder and delete it again? Does he need to call an IT manager? Does he just let his boss know? How does that work, right? You got to be really, really clear on this stuff. What's in bounds? What's out of bounds? Where can I, can I connect my work laptop to the Caribou Wi-Fi? Is that okay? No, it's not, by the way. Technical controls to limit access. There are some very basic, baseline, stroke of the pen, technical things that you need to have in place. Things like web filtering, email filtering, logging and alerting. I mean, all of those things. There's just, if you don't know what these are, find an IT partner and have them, buddy up and just, hey, what are the basics I should have in place? That's just, it's a no-brainer. You got to have it. Number 4, authentication policies. Yeah, this is password complexity. I went there. I know you've heard about it and heard about it and heard about it, but some of you still use password 1, and it's so easy for us, and you got to make your passwords more complex. Security awareness training. If I haven't mentioned it already, train people, right? That's how you're going to have the biggest effect on this. Any questions so far? Yeah. It's coming up, Steve. Why don't you, My goodness. Okay, so how can FrSecure help? Certainly, if you're unsure of where you have security risk in any area of your business, we can help you with that. Certainly, we can social engineer the crap out of you any way that you can possibly imagine. We can train your employees. We can check for technical vulnerabilities. We can do all of that stuff. What Steve was talking about and the reason why we're hammering on this so much, and the reason why we're so passionate about it is because you guys make it so easy for us. Verizon did a big cybersecurity study. They do one every year now. I think they used to do it like every other year. Now they do it every year. Out of 100 people that would receive a phishing email, 10 of those people are going to recognize right away that it's a phishing email and that it's malicious. And 3 of those 10 are going to click on it anyway. Can I drop my mic now? Yeah, I know. She's looking at me like, oh, what? I'm like, yeah. Because they don't have training, they don't know what they're supposed to do. I mean, and sometimes, honestly, it's the people that you would hope, like, you should know this. Like help desk professionals, they just want to see what it does. Like, I wonder what this is. Click, oh, executable. No, stop. It happens, So this is why, again, address it at a people level and try to have some consistency. This is not a one and done. Anybody who does annual cybersecurity training is just asking for it. It should be daily, right? Your department managers, everybody should know about this. It should be a part of the culture. And pat people on the back. If you're going to use a phishing exercise to trim the fat from your company, it's going to set a bad precedent. What you need to do is grab that person who stands up and says, I think I have a phishing email here. Hey, this thing, don't click on that. We're going to get notice out to everybody. Take that person to lunch. Positive reinforcement, right? Breed that culture of good security. They got a few minutes left? All right. So I guess before we tell a couple of cool hacker stories, any questions? Sir? Yeah.
The experts say a different password for every site, 16 characters, numbers, capital letters, change them every 3 months.
Yep.
No one can use it, right?
Well, I'm a big fan of password managers, so I use like KeyPass, for that. But I also have kind of like 2 categories of sites and things that I do. So first of all, whenever I sign up for anything that's just like an FYI, right? If you're going to ask me to sign up for like Heydays is coming to town, fill out this form, you might want a t-shirt. You're not getting my real name. You're certainly not getting my phone number. I have an email address specifically designed for spammers that I hand out. I use the same password for all of them. Because there's nothing on there that they're going to correlate to me. It's all BS information. It's just I got to sign up for this to get what I want. Okay, fine. I'll give you the same BS information I give everybody else. But things like Facebook, things like my work account, things like my personal email, all of those things are, they're all very unique. They're all very, high authentication. I watch them like crazy. I have a couple of things that, you know, just pass phrases, you know, that are a little easier to remember. You know, again, it's like instead of doing a password or figuring out like, oh, I know German, I can use a German word, and it just gets all jumbled up. You know, use a passphrase like, you know, wait for it. That's a passphrase. You know, it's a combination of words, and it's actually the number 4, and the I's are exclamation points, and the O's are zeros. You know what I mean? Like, you can do that kind of thing, but if you're managing a lot of them, password manager's the way to go, in my opinion. Yeah, KeyPass, LastPass, we're some others, guys. Yeah, Password Keeper. I think McAfee and Norton both have one now that they give away for free if you sign up for their antivirus. What doesn't work is spreadsheets or writing them down. Don't do that. That's not good. Yeah, you know, now we're going to get into risk methodology, right? What's the likelihood that LastPass is going to get hacked and your information is going to get taken? Pretty low. If the kind of. Everybody wants to say, like, oh, everybody's passwords were out there in the open. Nah, not really. They got their client information, and they didn't get anybody's, I don't think they got anybody's specific, like, account passwords, but they did get usernames. You know what I mean? Like, it was pretty superficial PII information, but it happened to a password manager company, so, yeah, yeah. So the impact is really high, but, you know, it's kind of like, show me a better alternative, and I'll start using that. Oh, yeah, yeah, wire fraud, yeah.
Please say to report it to IC3.gov, does that help?
Yeah, anything that you can do, like if you experience I call it a near miss or an attempt or something like that, you know, their FBI has a tip site, you know, you can do things, you can call things in. I always encourage that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. You never know, like, where it ends up. They may be like, hey, good to know, we're already on it. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, always a good idea. Why not, right? Oh yeah, there's always that, you know, it's like, hey, I just got hacked. World, look at me. Oh. Sir? Mm-hmm. Yeah, have a full understanding of exactly what that Wi-Fi network does, you know, and what it is. And I say, like I mentioned, the Caribou Wi-Fi, like any public Wi-Fi that does not require a password, I can literally stand up a clone Wi-Fi network, overload that Wi-Fi network with traffic and crash it, and anybody who has like automatically connect will fail over onto my network, and I can watch all the traffic going back and forth. That's why public Wi-Fis are dangerous. Because you could have to assume if you're on a public Wi-Fi network and you're sending emails or conducting business or logging into your bank account or whatever it is, you have to assume that it's like somebody looking over your shoulder. They know exactly what they're doing and recording it. So if you're at a client, first of all, they shouldn't be letting you do that, right? So it's like, well, you should have a Wi-Fi network, you know, just for me, or a port for me, or maybe a device that you've configured for me or whatever. Maybe that's a little bit overkill, but that goes back to the vendor risk management. You know, if you're doing business with other people, they should be conducting themselves from a security standpoint the same way you would, or that you would want them to. So I would ask questions like, who else is on this network? Who else is it made available to? Is this a public network? Does it require a password? How many people know this password? How often is it changed? And maybe you might consider, if that person has information on their machine or has access to information on their machine that is sensitive to you, that you just get them a hotspot and let them work that way. Sir? Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, my favorite is the, you know, we have a secured Wi-Fi. It's WPA. It's password protected. It's blah 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 blah. The password's on every wall in the building. There's nothing secure about that. You know, everybody knows the password. It's password 123 or whatever they set it at, right? Welcome guests to. Yeah. Thanks for securing your Wi-Fi for me. Any other questions? Yeah.
Have any like templates or checklists that you can kind of go through and check before you engage somebody like you to see for a reference that can be a client or do something like that? I'm not
Sure. If you're looking for like some of the baseline or the hot button security stuff, I've been pointing people to the CIS top 20. Used to be the SANS top 20. It's just 20 topics with some guidance on what you should be doing. But ultimately, a lot of that stuff out there, that templated stuff, is like, oh, how do we appeal to the common denominator? But every organization's different. I would really, if you've not done a risk assessment, a formal risk assessment from somebody like us, I would really encourage you to do it. It's eye-opening, and it'll ensure that your next security dollar is best spent. So that's always my advice. But check out the CIS Top 20. Yeah.
If you're using a mobile device, is it more secure to just use the cellular connection as opposed to the Wi-Fi connection?
I believe that. I just do. I don't think I've heard of anybody actually hacking a wireless tower and getting traffic from it. It's very remote. I always say, like, if I'm going to log into my bank account from my phone or something, and I don't connect to Wi-Fi's at all except for my home at all, ever. And it's a ghost network, and because I'm really paranoid because I'm in security, right? So whenever I'm logging into my bank account and I'm out and about, I wouldn't dare connect to a Wi-Fi network to do anything important. If I need to download a song from iTunes real quick, I might do it, but.
At Beasley, I get a MiFi, a Verizon broadband hotspot. I actually can be reprimanded, sanctioned, whatever you want to call it, if they ever identify that I'm on a public Wi-Fi. It's a company policy. We have to use that to connect, even with the VPN in place and all that. So yeah, the public Wi-Fi, when I go to Starbucks, I never use it. Never, ever. Because someone's sitting there with that laptop next to you, who knows what they're doing with that. So yeah, at least in my company, we have a corporate policy. We have to use our broadband cards to connect. We lock down our laptops. I can't use thumb drives. I'm often asked, and I think we dealt with this last year, Dan, when he needed a presentation off my laptop last minute. I was like, I got to log into the network. I got to email it to you because I can't use a thumb drive. So some companies put policies like that as well to help restrict it. I have to agree, it's really a company by company basis because you got to balance security with efficiencies, productivities, and the tolerance of the employee base. So, but that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second. So when you're assessing risk from a security standpoint, you're interested really in the likelihood something bad is going to happen to you, the impact if it were to happen to you, and then how effectively or how mature is your program or your strategy at dealing with those two things, okay? So laptops, what's the likelihood that a laptop is going to go missing? Incredibly high. They get left on airplanes and taxis. They get snatched and grabbed out of cars. They get left places. It's unbelievable. These things grow legs and walk off. So you got something with a very high potential likelihood. What's the impact when that happens? Well, it depends, right? It depends on what's on that laptop. If it had a bunch of health records on it, or a bunch of credit card numbers, or a bunch of employee information, or proprietary specs to whatever widget you build, it could be incredibly high. You could be talking about breach notification laws. You got to notify everybody. You got to get the FBI involved. Everybody's day becomes about this lost laptop. So you have something with a very high likelihood, a potential very high impact. What's something that you can do to that laptop that shows a high level of maturity or effectiveness in dealing with that likelihood and impact? Encrypt it. So you can be as sure as you can be if anybody ever got it, they wouldn't be able to read anything on it. You're just out the device. Because it's not good enough anymore to say, like, well, the information never surfaced, So it wasn't really a breach. No, they had just assumed now it's lost, it will surface, it's being used nefariously, and you're to blame. If it's gone, you just have to assume now that it's a breach. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, traveling internationally, not something I'm too familiar with and the risks and everything, but yeah, there are governments out there that will not allow you to bring foreign devices into their country because you may have protected them too much and they can't read your stuff, right? So I know a lot of folks, that when they travel to Asia, China specifically, or South Korea, Eastern Europe, Russia, that they have what's called just junk devices, right? They get something they bring in or buy there, and before they leave the country, they drill 1,000 holes in it and leave it because it's not safe to bring back, and it never had anything that you cared about on it in the first place. It was just a communication device while you were in country. That's sometimes pretty serious stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? Got time for a quick hacker story? Yeah. So I can tell you about how the police helped us carry out an attack. I can tell you about a bowling team that we breached at one point, or I can tell you about a power company impersonation. What do you guys want to hear? What was that? The Excel story? Oh yeah, well actually it was an NSP at the time, but okay, so that's a good one. So this was one of those towers downtown, the big buildings. It was a law firm, and the objective, quite simply, was to see if we could recover information from their core systems. Pretty simple, right? Can you get at our data? So our president, Evan, was a brilliant social engineer, got an NSP uniform from Goodwill and found a hat and got like a little clipboard, with an official looking kind of thing, and mocked up a badge and did the whole thing. And walked up to the front desk and said, hey, hi, I'm Evan with NSP, and there's some irregular power spikes and stuff in the building, so we're going floor to floor. I need to check your node to make sure it's not going to fry your IT equipment. Oh, okay, let me go get the IT manager. So the person at the front desk goes and gets the IT manager. She comes up and says, oh, hi, yeah, absolutely, come right this way, and lets Evan into the server room. And she's standing there, and kind of watching him. He's like, I can't believe they actually let me back here, It's like, got screwdrivers and poking at stuff and got this little meter or something, and he's doing whatever, and he's, fumbling around a little bit and writing stuff down. And IT people are busy, yes? Very busy, all the time. You guys are very busy. So she says, hey, you know what? My office is right there. If you just let me know when you're done, I'll walk you out. And leaves Evan alone in the server room. So he plugs in a wireless access point into the server and then just says, okay, everything's fine, leaves, goes into the lobby, and just downloads everything. With a uniform and a smile. So what's the to-do? What's the change? What could have been done differently in that situation? Yeah, right? Where's the super of the building? Where's the maintenance guys? The whole building's under electrical attack for some odd reason. How is this the first time I'm hearing about it? Right? Okay. Second. Anything else? Oh, don't leave them alone. The server room of your, the most important, the most expensive, the most valuable asset you have as an organization is what? Your information. The most sacred room in your house is probably what, your child's room? Would you ever leave anybody alone in there? With your child that you didn't know, that just showed up on your doorstep? No. Never. I mean, first of all, is there any way that I can do this without you setting foot in that room? No? Okay, I'm going to be attached to your hip. If you make any sudden moves, I'm taking you out, right? Very protective of that room. What's the last thing? Yeah, call NSP. Got this guy standing here telling me he needs to get in the server room. Are you kidding me? Did you send him? Just need some verification. It's a quick phone call. They'd be like, no, I know who Evan is, right? All right, I think that's all the time I have. You got it? Yeah.
Just going on that one, I am the most hated Beasley employee in the New York office when UPS or FedEx are leaving with a lot of boxes. Because exactly to John's point, what I do, and they see me come down the hall and they're rolling their eyes. Because what I'm doing is I'm asking for their badge, I'm calling FedEx, UPS, and verifying they're still employed. I do that every time if they're leaving with a lot of boxes. Because all it takes is that one time that employee is left, no longer employed, disgruntled, taking that kind of paper boxes of information, that's not good. So I literally do that exact thing where I will call them up. I even now know the exact which buttons to push to get to the people at FedEx or UPS to verify they're employed. So I do that every time they leave with a lot of things because all it takes is that one time that one employee does it, and that's a big breach right there.
Can you videotape that and share it with us next time? Yeah, don't knee tackle the UPS guy, but you know it's good to validate these people who are just coming in and out of your business and interact and could grab things. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, John. These are tough acts to follow, and I think I'm going to talk about risk management and insurance here. So before I do that, I want to see, Alex, did you have some comments on the bringing laptops into foreign countries, just quickly?
There was a gentleman brought up the question about, like, you know, with encryption going to other countries. I mean, I travel globally for work a lot. Generally, most countries, as long as you have commercially available encryption, that's sort of the term defined, you're usually going to be fine. Usually you have to deal with the safe harbor provisions. There's different ones. Switzerland has its own. The EU has its own. I mean, as long as you meet safe harbor provisions in terms of establishing what's known as commercially available encryption, you're pretty much going to be okay going to any country. The only exceptions are the State Department's definition of terrorist countries. If you have to do business there, there's a lot of red tape involved there. So if you have to go to some countries that are on that list, that's the only exception where it might be a little problematic or challenging on how to deal with that.
Thank you. We left some time at the end, too, for other questions, so if you have some, they're going to stick around to answer your questions. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking about some risk management techniques, and then Gloria is going to come up and speak on an IRS fraud technique that's happening for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A at that point. So, first off, I always show this slide whenever we talk about cyber liability because I don't think people understand all the steps that go into an event and the costs that your business can incur. So I want to walk through this, and we'll walk through it very quickly. But you can see, like in a typical, and I hate to say it, but insurance matter, you're going to spend most of your time down here in the civil litigation box. Okay, somebody's going to come against you, say, "Hey, you owe me money because you caused me some harm. You know, I want monetary damages." In a cyber liability event, there are a ton of expenses that your organization will incur in advance of hitting that civil litigation number. The discovery piece, the forensic piece, is a huge dollar amount, as John alluded to. When you're calling FrSecure, another company, when you have an event, the meter is running and is running super hot and super fast. You can incur, we've had clients that incur expense of $100,000 within the first week, just trying to get everything done, the cyber discovery and things, just trying to figure out what happened to whom and over what time period. There might not even be an event at this point. There might not be a claim, but determining what happened. So you need to understand that's a potential cost to your organization. Then you need to do the legal review. Like we said, there's 47 states at this point where you need to provide some sort of notification to individuals. So, but you don't, there's different thresholds and there's different types of responses in any given state based on the amount of data. So that is a huge cost that organizations can incur. So that takes a large amount of time and also a large amount of resources to determine what that is. You're probably going to have some external issues you're facing, public relations. You're going to ultimately have to provide those notifications in some of those states. You're probably going to want to provide some credit monitoring to those individuals that they're affected to make them come back to your business and continue to do business with your organization. You might have some business income loss. You will potentially have some damage to your brand or reputation that you're going to want to pick up, and then ultimately you might have civil litigation. So all these costs can happen to your organization, okay? So what we talk about with our clients is there's a very high likelihood of one of these events to happen, okay? And not to be doomsday, but there's also a very high likelihood you can come out on the other end and not be too scathed, okay? So we talk about what kind of plans or what kind of risk management techniques can we have in place. And the first thing we really want to talk about is what are your critical assets? As you look at your organization, what is most crucial to your organization, or what is most crucial to your customers, your clients? And so is it IP? Is it credit cards? Is it social security numbers? Is it employee records? What are these critical assets we need to protect? Okay? That's really the first step. Then we want to understand what threats are out there against these assets. And both John and Alex have done a nice job of laying those out today. So, but we look at, if you really break it down, it's people, it's technology, and then it's process. So do we have awareness of our people? Is our technology up to date? Have we done the last patching within our technology? Do we have the latest software or software that's solid, or hardware that's solid to protect our information? And then the process. Are we encrypting our laptops? Are we encrypting our PDAs? Are we changing our passwords every 3 months? These type of things. It's low-hanging fruit. Okay, I think the latest Verizon survey said 30% of these matters are just miscellaneous errors. Just not to pick on people, but being dumb. Just losing a laptop, leaving a PDA in the airport. So simple stuff that we can do as an organization. Once we understand the profile, we build that resilient system, then we ultimately need to plan for a breach. What are we going to do when we have that moment? And I think this is something I ask a lot when we're out in front of clients or prospects is, do you have a disaster recovery plan in place as an organization for a cyber event or for a data breach event? And unfortunately, you get a lot of blank stares on that. So one potential disaster recovery plan thing is to have an insurance policy. And I'm not trying to sell you an insurance policy here. I'm really saying that this is a nice tool. If you have an event, you can call a company like Beasley or a multitude of companies. There's 1-800 numbers, 24/7 serve. You call them up, they have everything on retainer. Or you can go through a plan like this. Like who's going to lead the plan? Okay, and I always think about Minnesota, right? You're driving up to the cabin, it's Friday night, this has happened to a number of our clients, and they discover they have an event. What's your first step? Who are you talking to? Are you going to send an email out to your team? You could. It's probably a bad idea because it's all going to be discoverable until you get an attorney involved, right? Are you going to say, was there a breach? You probably don't want to say it's a breach because that starts the meter running. So what's your first step and who's going to lead the plan? What we'd like to see, and you guys correct me if you're wrong, but you'd like a short list of people on a call tree that understand the event, that need to be at the table, and then get the folks running. And some of the people you want on that call tree are a law firm, potentially public relations, some sort of forensics firm to determine what happened to whom and over what time period, and then you can move forward, okay? And we've had instances where we've had insurance in place or we've had a good disaster recovery plan. We have this call on Friday night, and by Monday morning, we're all looking at each other and we're feeling pretty good. We've had other instances where it wasn't quite set up that well. And that happens on Friday night. We probably get the call on Tuesday or Wednesday, would you say? Sometimes Thursday, sometimes the following week. And then we're in a fix. We've got a lot of emails flying around. We've got maybe a law firm in there that doesn't really know the cyber exposure. It might be their first event or second event, and it's a mess. So if there's one thing I could say, we can, again, spend a lot of time on the low-hanging fruit, but then have a plan in place if something should happen or you think something potentially happened. When we do have that plan in place, we see a lot better results for our clients. Any questions on that? In the interest of moving this along, I'm going to pass the baton here to Gloria McDonnell, who is with Redpath, and I'm going to read a brief bio. Gloria is the tax operation director and serves on the leadership team at Redpath and Company. She also serves as the manufacturing and distribution industry team leader. She specializes in corporate tax planning and compliance, multi-state taxation, international tax, and tax research. Gloria works with closely held businesses in a variety of industries, including manufacturing and distribution, and has provided business tax accounting services since 1989. Gloria?
Thank you. Okay, do we have an IT person? Which way am I going? Keep going? I'm going there. Thank you. All right, awesome. All right, well, thanks for coming this morning. I'm not going to keep you here long because it's a beautiful day as we were discussing at the table, so we'll get everybody moving. And some of it's going to be a little repetitive. You guys did such a great job covering things. So what I really want to do is just give you an update from our perspective on what we're seeing with our clients. We get a lot of updates from the IRS as they become aware of some type of new scam that's out there. They alert us, and we try to keep our clients alerted to what's going on. One of the biggest things that we've seen is identity theft. In the last few years, when we go to file a return electronically, it will often get rejected, and many times the reason is that a return has already been filed. And we know it's a fraudulent return. We're trying to file for our taxpayer. And so there's steps that we have to take immediately when that happens, and one of them is immediately you have to notify the IRS, notify your State Department of Revenue so that they know that you've been a victim of identity theft. You should file a police report. There's a website that you go to, the Federal Trade Commission, to also file a complaint. And for sure, you want to contact the credit reporting agencies to let them know that you've been a victim of identity theft. And then there's some steps that the taxpayer has to go through now to file their tax return. They have to file it by paper. They have to file an affidavit with the return, swearing to the fact that they're a victim of identity theft. And then the IRS will issue them a PIN so that they can, in the future, file their returns electronically. So it's a bit of a hassle for the taxpayer. The good thing is, we were just in a meeting yesterday with a representative from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and he talks to accounting firms around the country. And he concluded in talking with those firms, just as we have this filing season, we have seen instances of identity theft go down compared to prior years pretty significantly. So that's the good news. The IRS and Minnesota as well are taking steps to prevent ID theft. They're flagging returns that they think might be suspicious and transferring them to a suspicious fraud alert center or whatever they do with them. That's the good news. The IRS is taking action. The bad news for the taxpayers is this often results in a delay in refunds. And we found that out specifically with one of our clients who had a fairly large refund, $70,000 or $80,000 refund, that they hadn't received for, it had been several months. We contacted the IRS, and they informed us that because of the size of the refund, the return was put in this suspicious fraud center, and it wasn't being processed. And the IRS was waiting for the taxpayer to call to ask about the refund. And their reasoning was if it was a fraudulent return, they knew that the scammer who filed the fraudulent return would not call about the refund, but if it was legitimate, the taxpayer would. So that was only the first step. And then it's after you make that first phone call, it's another 30 to 60-day delay, and they may follow it up with a letter then asking for more information. And then once you provide that, it still could be another 30 to 60-day delay. So we have seen a lot less identity theft, which is great, but we have seen a delay in refunds, especially if they're substantial refunds. The other thing is there's a variety of email scams, and that's already been talked about today, so I don't want to really, I'm going to give you a couple examples. One is the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel, which is actually a legitimate panel, a volunteer panel that works with taxpayers and the IRS to resolve issues. So they really are an advocate for taxpayers, a great organization. The email appears to come from a legitimate website that looks like it's from the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel. And of course, they're notifying you that you have a potential refund, and they want to help you get that refund, but they need to confirm some personal information, or they're asking for you to confirm your bank information so they can deposit the refund. So it's one of those things that it's good news. People want to tend to respond to that email, but it is a fraud. The IRS will never initiate a correspondence with a taxpayer through email. So anything that appears to come from the IRS should be ignored. They would never initiate something through email. The other one that we talked a little bit today about was the CEO emails or this W-2 scam. And we've actually had that happen to our clients this year. We've had 2 instances that I'm aware of with emails coming through from a CEO, CFO, and it looks like a legitimate email. They've got personal information. Hey, I'm at a conference this week, so I need to wire transfer to this account because we're buying this piece of equipment. So the email looks very legitimate. In one case, the wire transfer was made for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was gone. In the other case, the wire transfer was set up, but the person who set it up, before it could actually go through, something clicked that didn't seem right. She actually spoke to the person who sent the email, supposedly, and they confirmed it was fraud, and they were able to stop that one. So those are just 2 that I'm aware of that in the last few months that have actually happened. We also had the W-2 scam. We received an email from the IRS probably in February or so that this scam was taking place. So we had set up an email alert. We sent it to all our clients, warning them. And probably within a week or 2, a client of ours with several hundred employees fell victim to this, where the email came, it appeared to be from one of the owners needing the payroll file for the year. And that person actually sent the entire payroll file with all the employees' names, social security numbers, wages, withholding, all that information. So they luckily, within a day, I think, realized that it happened. So they were able to contact the IRS, the Department of Revenue, give the whole list of names and social security numbers, but they had to contact all those employees. The employees had to know that they potentially could be a victim of ID theft, and they had to go through the process then of contacting the credit bureaus and things like that to protect their information. So those are real things that are really happening. And it's sophisticated companies that have controls in place, but they're still falling victim to some of these scams. Oops. And there's a whole variety of these phishing and malware scams still going on. Again, the thing that I would just like you to take away is if you get an email that appears to be coming from the IRS, they absolutely will not initiate a conversation with a taxpayer or request any information through an email. So absolutely do not reply or click on those links. Again, they bring you to sites that look to be real, and it's just malware and it's phishing, so absolutely should ignore those. The phone call scams, we've seen an increase in that, actually. We have, our employees were targeted. We had several clients call and report to us that they were getting these phone calls. And the phone calls they're 2 ways. One is they're calling and saying that you owe money, and it's critical that you pay it right now, so they want credit card information, or they want banking information. And if you don't respond the way they want you to, then they threaten you with legal action. And they say they're going to call the police, you'll be arrested, and so on. The other way they call is to say, hey, you've got this refund. We're trying to process it. Can you confirm your your social security number, your birth date, banking information? So there's 2 ways that they're trying to get information. But again, the IRS would never call and demand payment or ask for credit card information or personal information. They would never call and do that over the phone. The newest one, for any of you that have students out there, this one just came out last week. So we have a lot of taxes in this country. We do not have a federal student tax. But the scammers are now calling college students and saying, and they've got personal information, so it sounds legitimate. They say they're from the IRS, they give their badge number, they've got some personal information about the individual, and they're telling them that they owe this student tax, and it has to be paid immediately. And so they want credit card information, banking information, whatever. And if the student doesn't respond the way they want them to, they threaten them right away that we're calling the local police, you'll be arrested, and on and on. So this is one that the IRS just emailed last week, that this is a new one that's happening, so targeting our college students. So just to make you aware of what's out there and to let you know these are things that we're really seeing with our clients, and again, they're sophisticated clients. So you would think that this wouldn't happen, but they do fall prey to it. So that's really it. I'm not going to keep you here, but I know you might have questions. There's people hanging out, so I'll turn it over if there's questions for anybody in the group.
Thanks, Gloria. Okay. Okay, that's the conclusion of our speakers this morning. Are there any questions for, all our speakers are still here, are there any other questions that we have out there that you'd like to have answered? Potentially answered? Okay, well, thanks for coming today. Hopefully you found this useful, and I would, we do have the cyber survey on the back table, is that right, Jeff? So please grab one of those on the way out, and if you have any questions on those, I think best contact information is on there, so she'll be waiting for your calls. Thank you.